Dad and daughter disappeared in Rockies' mysterious backpack found. Mark Thompson was a man who loved the outdoors more than anything else in life. Ever since he was a boy, he had felt a strong connection with nature. The forests, the mountains, and the rivers all held a special place in his heart. As he grew older, he passed this love for nature to his daughter, Emily. Emily was 10 years old, a bright and curious child with sparkling eyes and an adventurous spirit. She loved exploring the world around her, asking questions about birds, trees, and animals. The bond between Mark and Emily was unbreakable. They shared a love for laughter, adventure, and the quiet beauty of the natural world. This summer, Mark wanted to create a special memory with Emily, something they could both look back on for years. He had always dreamed of hiking the Rocky Mountains, where the air was fresh, the scenery breathtaking, and the trails full of mystery and wonder. Emily had heard stories about the Rockies from her father and often imagined herself walking along the trails, discovering hidden streams, and spotting wild animals. Now, the dream was about to become real. In the weeks leading up to their trip, Mark and Emily spent their evenings preparing. They studied maps of the trails, checked weather forecasts, and made a list of everything they would need. Mark carefully packed tents, sleeping bags, food, water, and first aid supplies. He also packed a few personal items for Emily, like her favorite toy and a small sketchbook for drawing the landscapes they would see. Emily helped with the packing, her excitement growing every day. She loved the idea of adventure but also trusted her father to keep her safe. Friends and family noticed the excitement in their eyes. Emily's mother, Sarah, felt a mix of pride and worry. She knew Mark was an experienced hiker, but the Rockies were unpredictable, and mountains could be dangerous. Sarah tried not to show her anxiety, but she reminded Mark to be careful, to stick to the trail, and to always keep an eye on Emily. Mark smiled and reassured her that they would be fine. "We've done this before," he said. "I know the mountains, and I'll make sure Emily is safe." Sarah nodded, though she could not shake off a small worry in her heart. The morning of their departure was filled with excitement. The sun rose over their town, casting a warm golden light on the streets. Mark and Emily loaded the car with their backpacks, carefully checking each item one last time. Emily wore her favorite hat and a small backpack with snacks and her sketchbook. She could hardly contain her excitement, bouncing on her toes as they drove toward the Rockies. Mark laughed at her energy, happy to see her so alive with curiosity and joy. As they approached the mountains, the scenery began to change. Rolling hills gave way to towering peaks, their tops touching the clouds. Pine trees lined the roads, and the air grew cooler and fresher. Emily pressed her nose against the car window, staring at the streams and waterfalls they passed. Mark pointed out different birds and animals along the way, teaching Emily to notice the small details that made the wilderness so beautiful. Finally, they arrived at the trailhead. The parking lot was quiet, except for a few early hikers and a ranger checking permits. Mark parked the car, and they stepped out into the fresh mountain air. Emily stretched her arms, breathing deeply. The scent of pine and wildflowers filled her senses. She felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nervousness. Mark knelt down to adjust her backpack straps and smiled at her. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked. Emily nodded vigorously. "Ready," she replied. The first steps on the trail were filled with laughter and curiosity. The path wound through tall trees, crossed sparkling streams, and climbed gently toward higher elevations. Mark pointed out interesting rocks, plants, and birds, explaining their names and habits. Emily listened carefully, sometimes stopping to draw something in her sketchbook or take a small pebble to examine later. They talked about their plans for the hike, imagining the views from the top and the wildlife they might encounter. As the hours passed, they found a rhythm in their journey. Mark led the way, making sure the trail was safe, while Emily followed closely, asking questions and sharing observations. They stopped occasionally for water and snacks, sitting on large rocks or fallen logs. Emily loved these breaks, enjoying the quiet moments where only the sounds of nature surrounded them. Birds chirped, a stream babbled nearby, and a gentle breeze rustled the leaves. Mark felt a deep sense of peace. These were the moments he had always dreamed of sharing with his daughter. The trail began to climb more steeply in the afternoon. Mark could see the excitement and determination in Emily's eyes. She wanted to reach the next viewpoint, where the mountains would open up in all their glory. He encouraged her, praising her strength and energy. "You're doing great, Emily," he said. "Almost there." Emily smiled, proud of herself. The challenge of the climb made the adventure even more thrilling for her. By late afternoon, they reached a small clearing with a spectacular view of the surrounding peaks. The sun was starting to dip behind the mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink. Emily gasped, taking in the beauty around her. She sketched the mountains quickly in her book, wanting to capture the moment forever. Mark watched her, feeling a wave of love and pride. This was more than a hike, it was a memory they were building together, a story of adventure, trust, and the bond between a father and daughter. As they set up camp for the night, Mark was careful to choose a safe spot, away from cliffs and steep slopes. He pitched the tent, arranged their sleeping bags, and prepared a small dinner over a portable stove. Emily helped by setting up utensils and organizing their supplies. After eating, they sat together watching the stars appear one by one in the clear mountain sky. Emily pointed out constellations she had learned about in school, and Mark told her stories of explorers and adventurers who had walked these mountains long before them. The night in the Rockies was peaceful but also full of mystery. The wind whispered through the trees, and distant sounds of animals echoed in the darkness. Emily felt a little nervous but comforted herself by sitting close to her father. Mark reassured her with gentle words, telling her that the mountains were beautiful but that they had to respect their power. They talked late into the night, sharing dreams, laughter, and quiet reflections. Finally, they crawled into their sleeping bags, exhausted but happy, ready to rest for another day of adventure. In that first part of their journey, everything seemed perfect. Mark and Emily were together, safe, and surrounded by breathtaking natural beauty. The bond between them was stronger than ever, and their excitement for the next day's hike was endless. Little did they know, the mountains held challenges they could not yet foresee. Storms, hidden trails, and the unpredictable wilderness were waiting ahead, and the adventure that began with joy and laughter would soon take a more serious turn. Yet, in that moment, under the vast sky and the quiet watch of the mountains, Mark and Emily felt alive and connected, ready to face whatever the Rockies had in store. They were a father and daughter united by love, curiosity, and a shared sense of wonder, a bond that would guide them through the journey, no matter what lay ahead. The morning after setting up camp, Mark and Emily woke up to the soft golden light of the rising sun. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of pine and fresh earth. Emily stretched and yawned, her face glowing with excitement. Today was the day they planned to reach a higher trail that promised an even more breathtaking view of the Rockies. Mark smiled at her energy, feeling a mixture of pride and caution. He knew the mountains could be unpredictable, and he wanted to make sure they stayed safe while still enjoying the adventure. After a simple breakfast of oatmeal and fruit, they packed their backpacks carefully. Mark checked the supplies once again: extra water, snacks, first aid kit, and emergency supplies. Emily carried her small backpack with her sketchbook, a notebook, and a few personal items. The morning seemed calm and bright, the perfect start to another day of exploration. They waved goodbye to the small campsite and began their hike along the winding trail. The first part of the trail was easy, passing through gentle slopes and shaded areas with tall pine trees. Birds chirped cheerfully, and Emily stopped frequently to observe small creatures along the path: squirrels chasing each other, butterflies fluttering, and ants marching in lines across fallen branches. Mark encouraged her curiosity, explaining how each plant and animal had a role in the forest. Emily listened eagerly, asking questions that made Mark laugh with delight. It was moments like these that he cherished most. By late morning, the trail began to climb more steeply. The air grew cooler, and the sounds of the forest became quieter as they moved higher into the mountains. Mark led the way, carefully choosing each step on the rocky terrain, while Emily followed, occasionally slipping slightly but quickly recovering with her father's steady guidance. The climb was challenging, but Emily's determination kept her going. She wanted to see the view at the top, the same one her father had promised her in their plans. Around noon, dark clouds began to gather overhead. Mark noticed the change immediately. The sky, which had been a bright, clear blue, now showed streaks of gray, and the wind started to pick up. He paused and looked at Emily, whose eyes widened at the sudden change in weather. "It looks like a storm might be coming," Mark said calmly. He tried not to show worry, but he knew that mountain weather could change quickly, and even a small storm could become dangerous if they were not careful. They continued hiking cautiously, keeping an eye on the sky and listening to the distant rumble of thunder. The wind grew stronger, making the trees sway and leaves rustle loudly. Emily held tightly onto her father's hand at times, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. "Are we going to be okay?" she asked, her voice small but trusting. Mark knelt down to her level and smiled reassuringly. "Yes, Emily. We planned for this. We just need to be careful and stick together." By mid-afternoon, the first drops of rain began to fall. They were small at first, but soon the drizzle turned into a steady rain, soaking their clothes and making the trail slippery. Mark knew that this could make the path dangerous, especially near cliffs and rocky areas. He decided to look for a safe spot to take shelter temporarily and assess the situation. Emily's mood remained upbeat despite the rain. She trusted her father completely and found joy in the adventure, even when it was challenging. As they found a sheltered area near a large rock formation, Mark unpacked a small rain cover for their backpacks and encouraged Emily to sit under the natural shelter. The rain was heavy now, and the sound of water hitting the rocks and trees echoed through the mountains. Mark checked their supplies and made a quick plan for continuing the hike. He considered turning back but also knew that they were well prepared and that the storm might pass quickly. Emily watched the raindrops slide down the rocks, fascinated by the patterns and the way the water sparkled in the fading light. After a short break, the rain lessened, and Mark decided it was safe enough to continue. He carefully led Emily along the slippery trail, holding her hand and guiding her steps. The trail became more challenging, with rocks slick from the rain and streams of water running across their path. Despite the difficulty, Emily kept moving forward, her determination unwavering. She trusted her father completely, following his lead and learning from his careful movements. As they climbed higher, the visibility decreased due to fog rolling in from the mountains. The once clear trail now seemed mysterious and unfamiliar. Mark relied on his knowledge and experience to keep them on the correct path, but he was aware that even a small mistake could lead them off track. Emily stayed close, holding onto his backpack straps at times for extra security. The beauty of the mountains was still visible in glimpses through the fog, with peaks emerging like islands in a gray sea. By late afternoon, they reached a point where the trail split. One path led to a known viewpoint, but it was more exposed and steeper. The other path appeared to be safer but would take longer to reach their intended destination. Mark paused to assess the options, thinking carefully about the safety of both paths. He knew that the clouds above were growing darker, and the wind was picking up again. Emily waited patiently, sensing the seriousness in her father's tone. After a moment, Mark chose the longer, safer route. He explained his decision to Emily, emphasizing that sometimes the best choice was the one that took more time but ensured safety. Emily nodded, trusting his judgment completely. They continued along the trail, moving slowly but steadily. The fog grew thicker, and the sound of rushing water from a nearby stream filled the air. Mark reminded Emily to stay close and to pay attention to each step. Hours passed, and the storm seemed to intensify. Rain fell intermittently, and the wind howled through the trees. Mark noticed signs of mudslides and loose rocks along the trail, making it increasingly dangerous. He considered turning back, but he also knew that they were close to a safe point where they could rest and find better shelter. Emily grew tired but remained determined, often glancing at her father for reassurance. He praised her courage and encouraged her to keep moving, reminding her that they were almost there. As they reached a small plateau, a sudden gust of wind nearly knocked Emily off balance. Mark grabbed her quickly, holding her close until she regained her footing. Emily's heart raced, but she smiled through the fear, proud of herself for staying brave. Mark took a deep breath, realizing that the mountains were testing their limits. He knew that he needed to stay calm and focused to ensure their safety. The plateau offered a moment of rest, with a small patch of dry ground where they could sit and recover. While they rested, Mark checked his map and compass, trying to determine the best route for the next section. He marked their position carefully and made mental notes of landmarks to avoid getting lost in the fog. Emily sketched the landscape quickly in her notebook, capturing the way the clouds and mist moved across the peaks. Even in the midst of the storm, she found beauty in the world around her, inspired by the adventure and her father's guidance. By early evening, the storm began to pass, leaving the mountains damp but calmer. Mark decided to push forward a little longer, hoping to reach a safer area where they could set up a temporary camp. Emily followed closely, her energy fading but her determination strong. They moved carefully, watching for loose rocks, slippery mud, and hidden streams. The trail was challenging, and Mark's focus never wavered. Emily trusted him completely, knowing that he would protect her no matter what. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the trail, Mark and Emily found a small clearing. It was not ideal for a full campsite, but it offered some protection from the wind and rain. They set down their backpacks, grateful for the small moment of safety. Mark looked at Emily, proud of her courage and resilience. "We've done well today," he said. "The mountains are tough, but we are tougher together." Emily smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment. As night approached, the forest grew quiet, except for the distant sound of running water and the occasional rustle of animals. Mark and Emily sat together, sharing a small snack and reflecting on the day's challenges. Emily talked about what she had learned and how brave she felt for overcoming the difficulties of the trail. Mark listened, feeling a deep sense of love and pride. They were safe for now, but the experience reminded them that nature was unpredictable, and caution was always necessary. In that second part of their journey, the mountains had revealed both their beauty and their danger. Mark and Emily faced challenges they had not anticipated, testing their endurance, courage, and trust in each other. The father-daughter bond grew even stronger as they navigated the storm, relying on careful planning, communication, and mutual support. Despite the difficulties, they found moments of wonder, laughter, and connection that made the adventure unforgettable. Little did they know, the true test of their journey was yet to come. The challenges of the mountains would grow, and the decisions they made in the coming hours could change the course of their adventure forever. For now, they rested together, ready to face whatever the Rockies had in store, confident in their bond and their ability to face the unknown together. The next morning, Mark and Emily woke to a calm and quiet forest. The storm from the previous day had passed, leaving the mountains misty and fresh, with the scent of rain-soaked pine filling the air. Emily stretched and yawned, rubbing her eyes as she peeked outside their small clearing. Everything looked peaceful, almost magical, with sunlight filtering through the fog. Mark was already awake, checking their supplies and planning the route for the day. Today, they aimed to reach a higher trail that promised even more stunning views of the Rockies. Mark carefully examined the trail map, pointing out the route to Emily. She listened intently, eager to continue their adventure. They packed their belongings, making sure their backpacks were secure and their emergency supplies easily accessible. Emily carried her sketchbook and snacks, while Mark carried the larger backpack with water, food, and first aid items. He double-checked their location and the landmarks they had passed yesterday to avoid getting lost in the misty forest. The trail started off gently, winding through tall pine trees and past small streams. Birds chirped cheerfully, and Emily stopped often to observe the details of nature, the patterns on leaves, the movement of small animals, and the sparkling droplets of water left by the storm. Mark encouraged her curiosity, explaining how the mountains and forests were interconnected and how every creature had its role in the ecosystem. Emily listened carefully, occasionally jotting down notes or drawing in her sketchbook. As the morning progressed, the trail became steeper and more rugged. The soil was soft and damp from yesterday's rain, making some sections slippery. Mark led the way, carefully choosing each step to ensure stability, while Emily followed closely, her small hands gripping the straps of her backpack. The climb was challenging, but Emily's determination never wavered. She wanted to see the view her father had promised, and nothing could stop her from reaching it. Around mid-morning, Mark noticed changes in the sky. Dark clouds had begun to gather, and the wind carried a chill that was unusual for that time of year. He slowed their pace and kept a closer eye on Emily, sensing that the weather could become dangerous again. Emily noticed the shift too, glancing nervously at the sky. "Do you think the storm will come back?" she asked. Mark smiled reassuringly, but his mind was alert. "It's possible," he said. "We'll be careful, and we'll stay together." As they climbed higher, the forest thinned, revealing rocky outcrops and narrow paths along cliffs. The trail became more exposed, with steep drops on either side. Mark held Emily's hand at times, guiding her safely over the more difficult sections. The view was breathtaking, peaks stretching endlessly, valleys shrouded in mist, and streams sparkling in the sunlight. Emily gasped with wonder, feeling the thrill of being so high above the world. Her excitement was contagious, and Mark felt proud of her courage and resilience. Suddenly, the wind picked up, stronger than before. A few raindrops began to fall, quickly followed by heavier rain. Mark knew they had to move quickly to a safer area. The trail was narrow and slippery, and the rocks were wet and treacherous. Emily held tightly onto her father, trusting him completely. They moved cautiously, step by step, focused on the trail ahead. The storm approached faster than expected, and visibility decreased as fog mixed with the rain. By early afternoon, the storm was in full force. Rain poured down, the wind howled, and thunder rumbled in the distance. The trail was barely visible, and some sections had become dangerous with mudslides and loose rocks. Mark realized they were in a precarious position. He searched for a safe spot to shelter temporarily, scanning the rocky terrain for a secure area. Emily's small hands gripped his tightly, and she tried to stay brave despite the fear building inside her. They finally found a small recess in the rocks that offered partial protection from the storm. Mark helped Emily sit down and checked their supplies. Water and snacks were available, and their rain gear kept them mostly dry. He encouraged Emily to stay calm, reassuring her that they would wait out the storm before continuing. Emily shivered slightly but nodded, trusting her father's judgment completely. They huddled together, listening to the rain pounding against the rocks and feeling the raw power of nature around them. After a short while, Mark decided to move again. He assessed the trail carefully and chose a path that appeared safer, though it required navigating around fallen trees and slippery rocks. Emily followed closely, trusting her father's guidance. The storm had created small streams along the trail, and water rushed past their feet as they stepped cautiously. Emily's heart raced, but the thrill of adventure mixed with the fear, making the experience unforgettable. Hours passed, and the storm began to subside. The clouds slowly parted, revealing patches of blue sky. The trail was still wet and muddy, but it was safer to continue. Mark guided Emily carefully, pointing out landmarks and checking their route frequently. Emily marveled at the way sunlight streamed through the clouds, creating rainbows over the valleys below. The beauty of the mountains after the storm reminded her of the resilience of nature and the importance of patience and careful planning. As the afternoon wore on, Mark and Emily reached a section of the trail that was particularly narrow and exposed. The cliffside dropped steeply, and the rocks were slick with rain. Mark held Emily's hand tightly, guiding her steps one by one. Emily's small legs worked hard to keep up, but her determination never faltered. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that the mountains demanded respect and caution. Mark's steady presence gave her confidence and reassurance. Suddenly, a large branch, loosened by the storm, fell near them, startling Emily. She stumbled slightly, but Mark caught her immediately, holding her close. The incident reminded them both of the dangers of the trail and the need to stay alert. Emily hugged her father tightly, feeling both fear and relief. Mark reassured her, explaining that accidents could happen but that careful planning and staying together kept them safe. Emily nodded, understanding the importance of vigilance in the wilderness. By late afternoon, they found a small plateau where they could rest. It was not ideal for a full camp, but it offered some safety and a chance to recover. Mark checked their supplies, ensuring they had enough food and water for the remainder of the hike. Emily took a moment to draw the landscape in her sketchbook, capturing the rain-soaked mountains, the mist, and the play of light and shadow. Even in the midst of challenges, she found beauty and inspiration in the world around her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountains, Mark considered the next steps. The trail ahead would become more challenging, and darkness would make it even harder to navigate. He planned to set up a temporary shelter and wait until morning to continue. Emily helped him arrange their small area, organizing supplies and making sure they were comfortable. They shared a simple snack and reflected on the day's events. Emily spoke about the thrill of the storm, the beauty she had seen, and the lessons she had learned about courage and patience. That evening, as darkness settled over the mountains, Mark and Emily felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with caution. They had faced a powerful storm, navigated treacherous trails, and relied on each other for safety. The mountains had tested them, but they had grown stronger together. Emily fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's challenges but comforted by her father's presence. Mark stayed awake a little longer, reflecting on their journey and planning for the next day. He knew the Rockies still held surprises, both beautiful and dangerous, and he was determined to guide Emily safely through them. In that part of their journey, the mountains had revealed both their awe-inspiring beauty and their hidden dangers. Mark and Emily faced challenges that tested their endurance, trust, and courage. The father-daughter bond deepened as they relied on careful planning, communication, and mutual support to navigate the stormy trails. Even in the midst of fear and uncertainty, moments of wonder and joy reminded them why they had chosen this adventure. But little did they know, the challenges were far from over. The Rockies held mysteries that would soon push Mark and Emily to the limits of their strength and courage. The path ahead was uncertain, and the decisions they made in the coming hours could change the course of their journey forever. For now, they rested together, ready to face whatever the mountains had in store, their bond and determination guiding them through the unknown. The morning after their stormy ordeal began with a faint pink glow in the sky. The forest was quiet, except for the soft rustle of leaves and the distant calls of birds awakening. Mark and Emily were eager to continue their journey, though the previous day's challenges had left them both tired. Mark carefully checked the trail map, estimating the distance to the next safe point. Emily watched closely, her eyes bright with curiosity and determination. They packed their backpacks methodically, making sure everything was secure and accessible. The trail that day was narrower and steeper than before. Patches of mud and loose stones made each step uncertain, and the forest seemed almost alive, shifting in the morning light. Emily stayed close to her father, trusting his guidance completely. Mark led the way, scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. He noticed broken branches and signs of erosion along the trail, reminders that the mountains, while beautiful, could be unpredictable. Emily tried to match his careful pace, stepping cautiously over slippery rocks and shallow streams. By mid-morning, the weather began to change again. Clouds gathered on the horizon, darker and heavier than the day before. A chill ran through the air, and the wind picked up, rustling the trees in a steady rhythm. Mark considered finding a safe place to wait, but he also knew that they were close to a point that offered better shelter and a potential route to lower ground. Emily noticed his furrowed brow and asked softly if he was worried. Mark smiled reassuringly, telling her that he was careful and always thinking about their safety. As they continued, the trail grew increasingly difficult. A steep incline led to a rocky ridge that required careful footing. Mark moved slowly, testing each step, while Emily followed, sometimes slipping but quickly regaining balance with her father's guidance. The mountains seemed almost alive with the echoes of their steps, the distant sound of running water, and the occasional call of a bird. Emily paused to look at the view, awed by the vast valleys and peaks stretching endlessly. Despite the danger, the beauty of the Rockies was mesmerizing, and it strengthened her resolve to keep going. Suddenly, a loud crack echoed through the mountains. A small rock slide had shifted nearby, startling Emily and making her stumble. Mark caught her immediately, holding her close until her heartbeat slowed. "It's okay," he said gently. "The mountains are unpredictable, but we'll be safe if we stay together and pay attention." Emily nodded, holding tightly to his hand, her small face showing a mix of fear and trust. This moment reminded them both of the delicate balance between adventure and danger in the wilderness. Hours passed as they navigated the increasingly challenging terrain. The trail twisted through narrow paths, across shallow streams, and along cliffs where one misstep could have serious consequences. Mark remained vigilant, constantly assessing the surroundings, while Emily followed every instruction carefully. She marveled at the beauty around her, the way sunlight reflected off the wet rocks, the mist rising from the valleys below, and the patterns of the clouds overhead. Every moment was a mixture of wonder and caution. By mid-afternoon, the storm clouds began to break slightly, revealing patches of sunlight. Mark decided to take a short break, choosing a small flat area near a rock formation. They sat together, sipping water and sharing a few snacks. Emily pulled out her sketchbook, capturing the interplay of light and shadow on the mountains. Mark encouraged her, reminding her that even in difficult moments, taking time to appreciate the beauty around them was important. Emily smiled, feeling proud of her drawings and grateful for her father's guidance. As they prepared to continue, Mark noticed something unusual along a nearby slope: a small backpack, partially hidden among the rocks. It was worn and weathered, and it did not belong to them. Mark approached cautiously, Emily close behind him. The backpack contained a few personal items, a small toy, some snacks, and a journal with handwritten notes. Emily recognized the handwriting immediately. It was her own father's. Her eyes widened in shock and fear. "Daddy, is this ours?" she asked quietly. Mark examined the items carefully, realizing that this backpack must have been left behind during some earlier attempt to navigate the mountains. Mark's mind raced. The presence of the backpack suggested that something had gone wrong somewhere along the trail. He carefully read the notes in the journal, which detailed attempts to find a safer path and reflections on their journey. Some entries indicated difficulties with the trail, while others expressed hope and determination. Emily watched closely, sensing the seriousness in her father's tone. Mark explained that the backpack provided important clues about where they had been and how they might continue safely. They continued along the trail with renewed caution, using the clues from the backpack to guide their route. Mark was more vigilant than ever, aware that the mountains could hide sudden dangers, such as hidden cliffs, unstable rocks, or rapid changes in weather. Emily stayed close, her trust in her father unwavering. They moved slowly, each step deliberate, carefully navigating the challenging terrain. The mountains seemed both beautiful and threatening, a constant reminder that nature demanded respect and attention. As the afternoon progressed, they reached a narrow section of the trail with steep drops on either side. The wind howled more fiercely here, and the path was slippery from recent rain. Mark held Emily's hand tightly, guiding her with every step. Emily felt a mixture of fear and excitement, knowing that they were facing real challenges together. She glanced at the distant peaks, remembering her father's stories of explorers and adventurers who had navigated these mountains before them. These thoughts gave her courage, reminding her that determination and careful planning could help them overcome obstacles. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the ridge above. Rocks tumbled down the slope, narrowly missing them. Emily gasped and clung to her father, her small body trembling with fear. Mark reassured her, emphasizing the importance of staying calm and moving carefully. He scanned the surroundings for safe routes, using every bit of his experience to guide them. The mountains were testing them, presenting both physical and mental challenges that demanded focus, patience, and courage. By late afternoon, they reached a small ledge overlooking a deep valley. It was a precarious spot, but it offered a moment of respite. Mark checked their supplies and assessed the remaining distance to a safer area where they could rest for the night. Emily took out her sketchbook again, capturing the breathtaking view despite the danger surrounding them. Mark praised her for her resilience and courage, reminding her that their journey was not just about reaching a destination but also about learning, observing, and growing stronger together. As evening approached, the sky darkened once more. Clouds rolled in quickly, and the wind picked up again, signaling the possibility of another storm. Mark knew that they needed to find shelter soon. He led Emily to a small recess in the rocks that offered partial protection from the wind and potential rain. They set down their backpacks, grateful for a safe spot to rest. Emily shivered slightly, but the presence of her father gave her confidence. Mark reminded her to stay close and calm, explaining that the mountains were powerful and required respect. While they rested, Mark reviewed the items from the mysterious backpack again. The journal entries provided hints about safer paths, potential dangers, and survival strategies. Emily listened carefully as her father explained the clues and their importance. The discovery of the backpack added both a sense of urgency and hope they could learn from past experiences to navigate the mountains more safely. Emily felt a mix of curiosity and concern, realizing that their adventure had become more serious than she had imagined. As night fell, the mountains grew quiet except for the distant sound of running water and the occasional rustle of animals. Mark and Emily huddled together, sharing a simple meal and reflecting on the day's events. Emily spoke about the excitement of the discoveries, the beauty she had witnessed, and the lessons she had learned about courage, patience, and trust. Mark listened carefully, feeling both pride and a deep sense of responsibility. The mountains had shown them their power, and he knew that the next steps would require even greater caution and vigilance. The discovery of the backpack marked a turning point in their journey. It reminded them that the wilderness was full of unknown challenges and that careful observation, planning, and trust in each other were essential for survival. Mark and Emily faced the reality that their adventure was no longer just about exploration, it was about navigating uncertainty, making decisions that could affect their safety, and relying on the bond they shared to overcome obstacles. In that part of the journey, the mountains revealed both their beauty and their mystery. The discovery of the backpack added suspense and tension, hinting at difficulties that had already occurred and challenges that lay ahead. Mark and Emily's trust, resilience, and determination were tested as they navigated the rocky trails, the unpredictable weather, and the physical and mental demands of the wilderness. Every step required focus, courage, and careful planning. Little did they know, the challenges were far from over. The clues from the backpack suggested that dangers awaited, and the path ahead would push them to the limits of their strength, courage, and bond. For now, they rested together, using the insights from the discovery to guide them. The mountains remained both a place of wonder and a source of suspense, and the journey toward safety and understanding continued, with each step carrying them deeper into the mystery of the Rockies. The day after the discovery of the mysterious backpack, Mark and Emily awoke with a mixture of hope and caution. The mountains were calm at first, with sunlight filtering softly through the trees and mist curling over the distant peaks. However, the tension of the previous days lingered. Both father and daughter knew that the Rockies were unpredictable, and the discovery of the abandoned backpack was a stark reminder that even experienced hikers could face danger. Mark carefully reviewed the trail ahead, using the notes from the backpack and the journal to make decisions. Emily listened attentively, absorbing every detail. The backpack had provided clues, small hints about which routes were safer and where obstacles might lie, but it also reminded them that someone had been here before, struggling against the same challenges they now faced. Emily could sense her father's determination to keep them safe, and she drew courage from his calm presence. As they navigated the rocky trail, the forest seemed unusually quiet. The sounds of birds and small animals were faint, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. Mark moved slowly, leading Emily step by step, aware that any misstep could have serious consequences. Emily's small hands clutched his tightly, and she followed his every move. Even though she was tired and hungry, her determination never wavered. She wanted to continue their journey, trusting her father to guide her through the mountains. Around mid-morning, they reached a steep section of the trail with loose rocks and narrow ledges. Mark carefully tested each step before moving forward, and Emily followed closely, trying to match his careful pace. The clouds began to gather again, casting shadows over the forest and adding an eerie atmosphere to the already challenging trail. Emily shivered slightly, but her father reassured her, reminding her that they had faced storms before and had always managed to find safety. By noon, the trail led them to a clearing where the view stretched out into a vast valley below. It was breathtaking, but Mark's attention remained focused on the path. He knew that the mountains could be both beautiful and dangerous at the same time. Emily stopped briefly to sketch the scene in her notebook, capturing the colors, the mist, and the way sunlight danced over the peaks. Even in the midst of uncertainty, she found moments of wonder and inspiration, and her father encouraged her to notice the small details of the world around them. As they continued along the trail, Mark noticed unusual markings on the rocks and trees. They appeared to be signs left by hikers or previous travelers, possibly indicating safer paths or warnings about dangerous sections. He carefully studied them, using the clues to guide their route. Emily observed closely, fascinated by the way nature and human experience intertwined in the wilderness. Each mark on a tree or a stone told a story, and she felt like she was learning secrets of the mountains that few people knew. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the mountains. Mark paused, listening carefully. The sound was distant but growing, and he quickly assessed the terrain. It could be a small landslide or falling rocks triggered by recent storms. He held Emily close and guided her to a more secure section of the trail, away from the cliffs and unstable rocks. Emily's heart pounded, but she trusted her father completely, knowing that he would protect her. By mid-afternoon, the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows over the valleys and cliffs. Mark realized they needed to find shelter soon. He searched for a flat area that could serve as a temporary camp, a place where they could rest safely until morning. Emily followed closely, her small steps careful and deliberate. The mountains demanded focus, patience, and vigilance, and every decision could affect their safety. Finally, they reached a small, sheltered spot near a cluster of rocks. It was not ideal for camping, but it offered some protection from the wind and the elements. Mark helped Emily settle down, unpacking a few supplies and preparing a small meal. They ate quietly, the silence filled with the sounds of the forest and the distant rush of a stream. Emily looked around, noticing how different the mountains seemed when viewed from this protected spot. Even in the midst of danger, the wilderness retained its beauty and mystery. As evening approached, Mark and Emily reflected on their journey so far. The discovery of the backpack had reminded them of the risks involved, but it had also offered guidance. Mark explained the importance of staying vigilant and learning from the experiences of others. Emily listened carefully, feeling a deep sense of trust in her father and an understanding of the lessons nature could teach. The mountains were not just a place of adventure, they were a place of learning, resilience, and growth. While they rested, the distant sound of voices reached them. Mark's ears perked up, and he strained to hear more clearly. It was faint, but unmistakable, the voices of hikers or searchers. Hope filled both of them, and Emily's eyes widened with excitement. Perhaps they were close to being found, or at least someone else was nearby who could offer help. Mark reassured her, explaining that the mountains were vast, and even if they heard voices, it might take time to reach them. Nevertheless, the sound gave them a sense of connection to the outside world, a reminder that they were not entirely alone. Night fell over the Rockies, and the forest grew quiet except for the natural sounds of animals and the wind. Mark and Emily huddled together in their small sheltered spot, sharing stories, reflecting on their experiences, and planning for the next day. Emily spoke about the moments that had inspired her, the colors of the mountains, the patterns of light and shadow, and the resilience of her father. Mark listened, feeling a deep sense of pride and love for his daughter. They were navigating not only the physical challenges of the mountains but also the emotional ones, supporting each other through fear, uncertainty, and hope. Meanwhile, back in their hometown, the news of their disappearance had spread. Search and rescue teams were mobilized, volunteers joined the effort, and social media posts shared information about the missing father and daughter. Families, friends, and neighbors held onto hope, waiting for any sign of Mark and Emily. The discovery of the backpack added urgency and clues to the search, but it also heightened the mystery. Authorities examined the backpack carefully, trying to piece together what had happened and where the hikers might be. As the night progressed, Mark and Emily rested, their minds alert but bodies exhausted. The mountains had tested them in every way through storms, treacherous trails, and unpredictable terrain. Yet, the experience also strengthened their bond, deepened their understanding of nature, and reminded them of the importance of trust, courage, and careful planning. Emily drifted off to sleep, comforted by her father's presence, while Mark stayed awake a little longer, thinking about the next steps and the safety of both of them. The following morning, they prepared to continue their journey. Mark used the clues from the backpack and the landmarks they had passed to navigate the trail carefully. Emily followed closely, attentive to every instruction. They moved slowly but steadily, aware that each step could bring them closer to safety or present new challenges. The mountains were both beautiful and demanding, teaching lessons of patience, resilience, and mutual support. As they advanced, they encountered areas where the trail was washed out or blocked by fallen trees. Mark carefully assessed each obstacle, deciding whether to go around, over, or find an alternative path. Emily learned from his decisions, understanding that problem-solving and careful observation were as important as physical strength in the wilderness. Every challenge they faced became a learning experience, a way to grow stronger and more resilient together. By late afternoon, they reached a vantage point overlooking a distant valley where rescue teams were searching. From this height, they could see the glint of sunlight on tents and the movement of people below. Mark realized that they were getting closer to safety. Emily's excitement grew, but she also remained cautious, understanding that they still had to navigate the remaining trails carefully. Together, they descended slowly, aware of the risks but hopeful that their perseverance would pay off. As they neared the search teams, voices called out, and lights from headlamps moved through the trees. Relief washed over both Mark and Emily. The sense of danger was still present, but the knowledge that help was near brought comfort and renewed energy. They were guided down the trail, carefully stepping over rocks and roots, until finally they reached the safety of the search party. Emily ran into her mother's arms, tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. Mark followed, exhausted but relieved, knowing that their adventure had reached a turning point. In the days that followed, the story of Mark and Emily's journey through the Rockies spread widely. News outlets covered the disappearance, the discovery of the backpack, and the incredible resilience and courage of the father-daughter duo. Authorities emphasized the importance of preparation, caution, and respect for nature when hiking in mountainous regions. The community celebrated their safe return, but the story also left lingering questions about the dangers they had faced and the mysteries of the wilderness. The experience left a lasting impact on Mark and Emily. They had faced storms, treacherous trails, and moments of real danger, but their trust in each other and their careful planning had guided them through. Emily had learned about courage, observation, and resilience, while Mark had witnessed her strength and determination in the face of challenges. The mountains had tested them in every way, but the bond between father and daughter had emerged stronger than ever. Even though the mystery of the backpack and the exact sequence of events remained partially unresolved, the story became a powerful reminder of the beauty and unpredictability of nature. It highlighted the importance of preparation, awareness, and mutual support, as well as the enduring strength of human connection in the face of uncertainty. For Mark and Emily, the Rockies had become more than a place of adventure. They had become a symbol of courage, trust, and the deep bond between a father and his daughter.